What if I told you, as a medical provider, that you can be seeing patients on a fairly regular basis, but in a lighter schedule, where you can talk to the patients, where you can use your medical knowledge, but where you are not responsible for the patient's health per se? You are not really diagnosing them, you are not treating them, you are not ordering all the different labs and following up with them. Does a position like that actually exist? Well, I think that I have found it. Today I'm going to be talking to Sarah Gino. She is a PA and she actually works full-time clinical research. She seems to have a great mix of having some patient interaction, using her medical knowledge, but also having that freedom and flexibility of not having your own patient panel, not having to do extensive charting, and to be able to leave work at work. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, then stay tuned and watch this video and learn about what it's like to work full-time as a clinical researcher. Really quick, before we hear about this interesting area of medicine, I would love to ask you for your support. Please hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't. At the end of the video, if you like the video, please hit the thumbs up if you find some value in what I do. Okay, let's hear what Sarah has to say about clinical research.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Gino, and I've been a mostly primary care PA for 20 years, who's now working in clinical research.
Welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us today. So you mentioned that you have been working in primary care for a long time. When did you graduate PA school, and what has kind of been your career path leading up to this point?
Sure. Yeah, I graduated in 2003, and I've worked in three different states, mostly family practice, internal med, all private practice outpatient, and then a rheumatologist where I had mutual patients with was an associate medical director at a private research facility and reached out and invited me to join the practice.
Did you have a research background at all, like in undergrad or somewhere else? Had you done much research in the past?
When she reached out to me, I had no research experience. I read the job description, it was all Greek to me. I really didn't know that PAs did research, didn't know if I could do it.
We're going to go more in detail, but kind of just in general, like what clinical research actually is. Like, what are you doing it for?
There's all different types of clinical research. Most of like the inpatient research will be very much treatment based and specific to a subspecialty or a certain disease. But the outpatient clinical trials, like at our outpatient private practice, we do mostly vaccine trials, but we also do migraine medicine, weight loss medications, historically, all the statins for cholesterol, blood pressure meds, birth controls, inhalers have all come through the doors.
So clinical research in general normally revolves around some type of medication or vaccine. Then it's like you're testing it to see if this is going to be a viable medication and or if it has, too many negative side effects, those kind of things, right?
Yep, it can also be devices like a cardiac arrhythmia device or barrier garments for incontinence. I mean, there's all different devices. Sometimes you're just testing urine and blood to get a general population baseline for what are the healthy values for certain tests. Even like rapid testing, rapid HIV tests, rapid COVID tests, you need to run trials on those before they can get approved.
Tell me a little bit about this research company you work for. Like, are they part of a big conglomerate, big pharmaceutical company? Is it independent? Do they have their own offices and clinic? Just, whatever, just help people get an understanding of what a clinical research facility is like.
For ours, we're a little unique because we are a family run private organization. And so we have everything in house and we work with sponsors like the pharmaceutical companies with what's called the IRB and in between as kind of an ethical monitoring board as a third party. Everything's also FDA approved. We get FDA audits, all HIPAA compliance. But in our private setting, we do things a little differently than say hospital based. So if you were working on research in the hospital, really commonly GI, cardiology, HIV clinics will have a lot of treatment research. You might be responsible for your own recruitment, so finding the appropriate patients that meet the inclusion and exclusion that makes them a good candidate for the study, as well as seeing them dosing them, following up with them. You might do it all. Whereas in our facility, we have departments for all of that. So we have an entire recruitment department. So they're trained by the PAs on medical terminology, disease processes, how to screen patients appropriately. We have our entire nursing department, which are more like the project management, running the day to day in and outs. And then the APPs, we will see the patients mainly for screening visits or the visits where they get randomized to placebo or whatever investigational product they'll receive. And then if they do have any concerns, or say they end up in the hospital at some point during the trial or have a surgery during the trial, we as the APP have to come in and see them and try to weed through the information and deem, is it related to the investigational product or unlikely not related, and report all that back to the sponsor and the FDA and all of that.
Because that's the first step, right? You have to find out if they're even suitable for to be in the trial. Because even though they're sent to you, they may not be suitable, right?
Exactly. Yep. So each protocol, each study has inclusion and exclusion. So that you have to meet specifically, and they're very by the books and strict. And sometimes there's some room for what we call PI or sub-I. So sub-investigator is what an APP is, discretion. So you kind of say, well, if you say that have an exclusion for no autoimmune disease, and they say that you feel in the opinion of the investigator could affect their overall immune system, then it's kind of up to us to use our critical knowledge of disease processes. Some sponsors consider rosacea and Raynaud's to be autoimmune, which they can certainly be part of bigger autoimmune disease processes, but we can kind of look at it and say more than likely this person would not have an overall immune issue versus, say, someone with rheumatoid or Sjogren's. You really maybe don't want to include them.
It sounds like you obviously have to use your judgment, but whoever is wanting their product tested, they're giving you the inclusionary factors.
Correct. So the sponsors and their scientists create the drug, write the protocols for how the trial is going to proceed. Then they use us and the third party of the IRB. They contract with us. They make sure that we're capable of running the study, whether it's staffing, supplies, experience, and then they award us the study. And we constantly have the IRB and the FDA as middlemen, making sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and the protocols can be hundreds of pages long. And I don't know for like inpatient research how if this works similarly, but at our facility, the APPs, when we get a protocol, we have to read through the entire protocol and pull out the pertinent information and summarize it into 1 or 2 pages to then go train our recruiters, train the nurses. We're very fortunate. Our nurses are mostly RNs, and they actually know the protocols inside and out better than us, mostly because they're the project managers of how the day-to-day operations are going to actually flow.
You have patients being sent to, or, that are coming in. You've got, I assume, a schedule of patients that you're seeing every day, from the start of the project, determining their eligibility. And then I assume the patients are coming back like on a regular schedule to do like checkups?
They are. Yeah. So we have a lot of safety follow-ups. Most patients, after they receive their randomization to either get placebo or whatever version we're investigating, they will usually for about a week, sometimes a month, complete a diary, whether it's paper. A lot of them are moving to electronic devices or apps, anything that they think is different than their norm. And they report that back to us. They come in for blood work to check safety levels. So it depends on the phase of a study. Early phases will have very small number of participants, and they may come in very frequently to check blood work. And then you get to later phases where most of the safety and efficacy has been proven. You're just trying to look at lot to lot consistency or large number. Does it meet the objective for preventing or treating the disease? So the diary involvement will change depending on the phase and the follow-ups. But quite often in our facility, they'll only see the nurses as at follow-up unless there's a concern.
What kind of numbers are you talking about? Are you having to like really go through patients quickly, or do you get time to talk with them? How's that work?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I had to take a break after like 17 years of primary care. The burnout, So that is one thing with this is that we have a slightly slower pace. I can sit and chit chat and you really want to have that time with patients, especially because you want to make sure a huge part of clinical research is the informed consent. So really making sure they truly understand what they're volunteering for, the risks and benefits. So we do have a more relaxed schedule. Usually every day is completely different. Our nurses are pretty busy all the time, as always, everywhere. Couldn't do it without them. But as a provider, some days we may see only a couple patients. And so on those days, we're going to do more reading protocols, training of staff. We're also involved in like clinical competency. So just making sure everybody's up to date on HIPAA and EKG training and making sure anything like that is taken care of. Sometimes we will do a bulk day. So if we have like a vaccine trial, and this happened a lot with COVID, where we needed to have maybe 500 to 1,000 participants, what we will try to do is maybe once or twice a week do what we call a bulk day. So we know we're not going to get any of our admin work done, and we're just going to see patients all day long and try to knock out the numbers as far as getting people in and vaccinated, because there are limitations. Some of the studies are competitive. So you're competing within your country or even globally for maybe a certain age bracket might close. You might middle of the day, okay, females 18 to 55 closed. And so it can be competitive, but not always.
So when you're seeing these patients that are coming back in for follow-up and you're gathering this information, then what happens with that information? Like, are you as an APP, are you going through and kind of aggregating your own data, or are you just responsible for inputting it into like a certain program, and then there's a scientist or somebody else who's kind of sifting through?
Our main responsibility is to assess if we think it's due to the investigational product or not, and assign that connection or not. In our facility, our nurses or our research assistants are the ones who are responsible for submitting the results off to the sponsor. So we are often blinded to the blood work and the antibody levels, which is kind of frustrating because you're curious, but it helps keep the data clean and unbiased. And so it has to stay blinded.
So if you're evaluating somebody that's coming back in and they're having some reactions, I imagine those can be pretty difficult to tease out. Do you have other people you can turn to and ask for second opinion on that?
At our facility, we have another PA as a sub-investigator. So we'll bounce ideas off of each other. But we always have the principal investigator, who is usually an MD, but sometimes with enough experience can be an APP. And so they usually have the final say. They have the final responsibility for the patients in the clinical trial. And our CEO is actually an NP by trade, which is pretty awesome. And she's created this whole facility from the ground up. Very successful woman. So we always have her to bounce ideas off of as well. She's been doing it forever.
What other things do you sometimes get involved with in the research process?
I don't think you would necessarily an inpatient research be assisting in what we call the feasibility. So that's trying to decide if we should go for a study or not. Possibly, though, I could just not be knowledgeable enough. But in our facility, our president is not medical. And so he relies on the APPs and the MDs, read this protocol. Does this study seem ethical? Does it seem feasible? Can we find these patients out in the community? Say it's for a pneumonia study. How many people would be in the age group that they're looking for who haven't already received a pneumonia vaccine, and then look at the inclusion and exclusion. It can be very difficult, especially for like migraine studies or weight loss studies. There's like medications that you have to have not had within a certain period of time. So, there's a lot of thinking about process and treatment before they even come in the door. So, giving that clinical knowledge, do these patients exist? Does this seem ethical? Are we doing any harm by doing this? So we do help out with that kind of administrative clinical input. We'll help the marketing. We'll review all the marketing material to make sure that the clinical content of it is accurate. business development will help with that and recruitment as far as how can we find patients, how can we get out into the community, whether it's a mobile unit, whether it's collaborating with community providers, lots of different areas.
So another thing that's kind of cool about clinical research is that it's what you're doing is pretty important. You are on the forefront of what's going to be coming out in medicine that may be changing people's lives. Do you think about that very often?
We do. It's really interesting. We kind of have a sneak peek for different disease process and states, treatments, prevention. We kind of know what's coming ahead of time. It's a sneak preview. Many of the investigational products that come through will not make it to market. So sometimes that is difficult. You feel like wasted time and energy. But you have to you learn from the failures just as much as the successes. And so one of the difficulties I think with clinical research is being blinded to the outcomes. You have to be patient to know if something's going to actually be working or not. And just not really having that direct impact feel of I saved a life today. And it's more a behind the scenes, and you know that eventually it's going to make a huge difference. I joined a couple months before COVID hit. So my introduction to research was a whirlwind, and probably the closest to direct benefit that research has seen in a long time, if ever, because we were pushing the data through. We are still following all the same safety, all the same guidelines, just a lot of the red tape, bureaucracy, paperwork stuff behind the scenes was able to get pushed through. And it really is so interesting to be a part of something that was a part of the global community and currently relevant and luckily successful. But oftentimes in clinical research, it's not as day to day pertinent and active and feeling like, oh, I made a huge difference today. Most trials will last anywhere from 1 year to 5, 10, 15 years. Sometimes they're shorter, but that's usually towards the later phases when the safety and efficacy has been proven and they're looking for different things. But it's extremely detail oriented.
In general, like if somebody asks you, what do you love about doing research, or what has been some pleasant surprises that you didn't necessarily anticipate, what would you say?
What I love about research so far is, as you had mentioned before, being able to flex different muscles. It's just given me an opportunity to take all that clinical knowledge, but also branch off into marketing, business development, leadership, staff education. I also love that most of the time in clinical trials, patients are volunteering to be there. They want to be there. They're getting compensated for their time. So they're usually generally polite and in a good mood and want to be an active learner and participant, which is a big change from when I practiced primary care, where patients were trying to avoid coming in to avoid high copays or didn't want to take time off of work to come in for a medication refill and those kind of things.
Have you ever had anybody get upset with you for any reason? Like if they did have a side effect, or if they felt the medication that they were trialing wasn't working for them? Anything like that ever happen?
We have very thorough informed consent. So they're very aware, and we test their knowledge that they're aware of what potential side effects or risks and benefits can be. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to most people if they get a fever or their arm hurts after a shot. It's rare that something else comes up.
So, say somebody does have a reaction to a medication, and you're pretty sure it's from whatever it is that's being tested. Do you get involved with that treatment at all, or do you basically just note it and then refer them back to the primary care for management of that condition?
Our main responsibility is the data collection and submission. So we will bring them in, of course, to do a physical and collect any information. We will advise them. We report it all to the sponsor for legal medical documentation. But we personally aren't a treatment facility, so we will refer out. We will call their providers if we think they need to see a specialist, but we aren't a treatment facility. I think it's different with most research places being within an academic or treatment hospital facility. They're doing your treatment and your research all in one. So our situation is a little bit unique, but we're still there for communication, guidance, and if anything needs to be reimbursed, we get the sponsor involved. And
If somebody was interested in it, do you think that these do exist in other states that people can find?
I know that they do just from talking to our president in his collaborations throughout the country. So I know that they do exist. I think it is far more common to be within a hospital system and departments, specialty departments.
When you're talking about people doing research in a hospital, are usually those people doing full-time research in the hospital and they're kind of doing similar to you, but just in a hospital setting? Or are we talking about people who work have a regular GI practice and they're just incorporating research in as part of their regular practice?
Each hospital probably has their own research department where I'm sure there are some that are doing full-time research. But for the most part, it seems to be something that gets incorporated into the day-to-day practice.
Okay. So if an APP was really interested in this and they really like the whole aspect of not having a clinical practice in addition to doing research, they would need to try to hunt out and find these standalone research companies like you work for.
I think if someone wanted to do full-time research, yes, they would have to seek out these independent practices or discuss at the research departments within the hospital what kind of opportunities there are to just do research.
Any advice on like how to find these facilities or where they might be posting their open positions?
There's the Society of Clinical Research and also the Association of Clinical Research Professionals. They have great websites where you can do free trainings to just kind of increase your knowledge of clinical research. There's a lot of YouTube videos talking about in detail clinical trials, clinical research. So you can get the knowledge going as far as a background, but also these organizations post job openings, a lot of networking opportunities. They have annual conferences. So there's certainly ways to reach out and find what's around you.
The compensation for a full-time researcher, does it seem to be about equal to working in a clinical practice somewhere? Does it seem to be on the lower side or even maybe a little higher?
For myself, coming from primary care, which is underpaid in my opinion, it was certainly a step up. But again, it's a private company, so I can negotiate my contracts. There are perks and benefits and flexibility with schedule. I can't speak to the in hospital. From my understanding and the few people that I've talked to who are APPs who have taken on that leadership role of including research into their day-to-day job, it seems to be similar to if you were a lead APP.
I know that there will be times where your hours may be different, but do you have kind of a typical schedule and what is that?
I work 3.5 days. I have the opportunity to work more. I just choose not to right now with little ones. Sometimes we'll have days or weeks where patient flow is lower because we're in between studies. Those you do your administration time, your continuing education, maybe the flexibility to work from home on some of that and do Zoom training and admin. Other weeks, during COVID, it was all day, every day. Yeah, every week's different, which for someone who's very type A like myself, it takes a little getting used to.
So when you say 3.5 days, like are you working 8-hour days, 10, 12-hour days?
I work 7:30 to 4:30 roughly, and then we only work Friday mornings. So it's nice. We all have Friday afternoons off. I was really looking just for more flexibility and not to have to be taking home charting every night with two small children. That alone was worth the jump. I'm glad I had the really strong background of many years of primary care and different diseases, multi system diseases. So I think it brings a lot to the plate. But versus if someone had only done orthopedics, it might be hard to come and do clinical trials because you really need to have a background in immunology and rheumatology to some degree. You have to have been able to recognize and manage autoimmune diseases and, multiple different medications and disease process.
Any advice on how people can prepare to work in this specialty?
I think it depends on what kind of research you want to do. If you know that you want to do cancer research, you should go get a hematology oncology position. If you want to do cardiology research, you should get the background and work your way into it. If you're primary care and you want to do just full-time clinical trials with vaccines and medications, I really feel that at least 1 to 3 years of general medicine is great just to build your foundation. But it doesn't mean you have to. You can do a lot of self-education.
Any other challenges or kind of negatives about research that people should probably think about if they're looking into this?
It's a lot of details to keep organized in your head. And so it's mentally quite a challenge, but not necessarily as emotional or physical as other jobs in medicine
Right.
can be.
I guess some people might struggle with reading through these protocol documents. It's not light reading, right?
It is not light reading. The first 2 weeks I joined and I had to get myself up and on more than a dozen trials. So I was just reading protocol. It's like, what did I do? It's so dry. But once you get the hang of it, they tend to follow a similar flow, a similar pattern. So it's hefty reading. If you're someone who really likes that adrenaline rush, the fast paced environment, like ED and urgent care, this is not for you. It's much more slower based. If you're someone who needs that instant gratification of bedside, we do see patients, we do get a rapport with them, but it's not the same as hospital medicine or primary care where you're seeing patients for years, numerous times a years, and they get to be almost like family to you. You don't have that deep of a connection, but you do still get bedside care and you get to flex your brain with the other administrative ways, which is nice.
Do you find that you're having to bring these studies, the protocols home and read them at home or finish any kind of paperwork at home, or are you leaving work at work pretty much?
Pretty much leaving work at work. And that was kind of the deal. I said, if I'm going to make this jump, I need that work life balance. And so there's definitely more administrative time available in research. Not to say, though, that there aren't some times where there are timelines. We don't get to make the timelines of when the sponsors are launching their study. And we may have a month where 4 or 5 studies are launching all at once. We might have a month where none are, and we're just in follow-up phases. So it definitely is a bit of a roller coaster. You just have to learn to push through the busy times and learn to know how to relax in the slower times.
Any other thoughts that you want to throw out there for people who to learn more about clinical research?
I would say reach out to people who are already doing it. Ask questions, look at your local research in the local hospitals, look at the different organizations. But the biggest thing you could probably do is go try it yourself. So that's what I wanted to bring up is that if you're not sure clinical research is for you as a profession, we all can still be patients as well. And we're always looking for healthy volunteers. See what kind of research is available in your community and go be a participant.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and helping to educate us about another option that we have as PAs or NPs.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure. Anyone's welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to follow up with anybody who wants to have a more personal conversation. I'd be happy to do that.
Great. Well, I'll put links to your LinkedIn profile. I swear every time I do these interviews, I think this is it. This is what I want it to do. Who knows where I'm going to end up, but I just love learning about this new stuff. And I hope that you found it to be very interesting. If you watch this and you're like, yeah, no, clinical research doesn't sound like it's right for me, but you're still kind of searching for where you belong in medicine, you can watch some of these videos here about PAs and NPs doing other cool and unusual things, or you can check my main channel page and I have my videos broken out by playlist. Thanks for joining me today. Take care, stay sane, and I'll see you next time on the Medicine Couch. Bye.